Welcome to the Business Focus podcast. Before we start, can we ask one thing? 74% of you that watch this channel frequently do not subscribe. If you've enjoyed our videos, please could you do me a favor and hit the subscribe button? It helps this channel more than you know, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the learning gets. Welcome to the Business Focus podcast. Jonathan Herps is the host of the Business Focus podcast. He is a strategic advisor, coach, and mentor to entrepreneurial business owners, CEOs, and senior executives. In this podcast, he chats with entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs of scaling companies. It centers around their entrepreneurial journey so far and their aspirations for their companies.
Hi there, welcome again. Today it's my great pleasure to introduce Jonny Harrison, who's the CEO of Shine+Drink. Hi there, John.
Hi, Jonathan. Good to meet you.
Yeah, and you. Thanks so much for joining me.
No problem at all.
So listen, why don't we just jump straight in? And we might start with your entrepreneurial journey so far, leading up, because you've only just been recently appointed to this role. So just give me a quick background and then some background on Shine as well, please.
Yeah, so I mean, Shine+Drink has been around for around 7 years. It's a nootropic energy drink, so focuses on providing a better alternative to the energy drinks that are available in market using nootropic natural ingredients.
Not full of sugar.
No sugar, zero sugar, all natural, no flavorings. So yeah, really different proposition and really targeting those people that are looking for energy. And obviously caffeine has become a bit of a way of life for most people these days, whether it's coffee or energy drinks, but doing it in a better for you way with some functional benefits.
Right. And what's your journey been up until being appointed?
Yeah, so I've been here for about 4 months. Prior to that, I've probably had a reasonably corporate career. I started off my career at PricewaterhouseCoopers many years ago, and did lots of different things, but focused on retail and consumer goods. I was then fortunate enough to get a job with Lion, the brewery, and I worked with them for about 10 years in a whole heap of different roles across commercial sales, commercial marketing, business development. But really what piqued my entrepreneurial interest was a role there looking after their portfolio of investment options that they have. So they owned 50% of Remedy Kombucha. They also did some small equity stakes in some technology startups that were sort of adjacent to beer. So, one was around an ordering platform for cafes and restaurants. One was a delivery service. And so I ended up on the board of those businesses and went through what was a really interesting period, helping those businesses scale and grow from going out there and looking for seed investment all the way through to scaling and growing. And in many cases, Series A, Series B funds. And during COVID as well, which was a really challenging time for a lot of those small startups, but very fruitful for most of them in the end. So, that's been my journey, really.
Right. So listen, tell me, so you've sort of described your perfect client. Can you take me through a step further? I mean, where would I find you?
Yeah, so Shine's available in all major petrol and convenience stores. Okay. So think 7-Eleven, Ampol, BP, United, Chevron, etc.
Well, in other words, I don't buy Red Bull one time and then want to buy you. Is that the plan?
Yes, yeah. So we sit there in the what they call the energy fridge with Red Bull and V and some of those other guys, and it's really about disrupting those consumers and saying, hey, why pick up a traditional energy drink that's full of sugar and full of chemicals, and why not get the same energy hit from a product that's better for you and actually has some really strong health benefits behind it with turmeric and ginseng and ginger extracts, things that are proven to actually be functionally beneficial. So, in all those petrol and convenience channels, also in grocery, in Coles and Woolworths, and Harris Farm, and branching out into some more niche areas like health food stores. We're in quite a few gyms locally as well. So, trying to get the brand out and about as much as we can.
Thank you. So this next question is a difficult one for you because I'm asking about the pandemic and what actions you took in the business and you weren't there. So maybe you could sort of go back a bit and What actions in the businesses that you're working in did you take in the pandemic that has stuck with the business?
Yeah, so the businesses I was working with at the time, and as I mentioned, a few of these agile technology startup businesses, and with a few of them, we thought it was, the end. Everyone was not going out, and things were looking pretty bleak. So I think that the key action there was around just acting early and being decisive. Sitting on your hands and waiting for the government or somebody to tell you what the best course of action is, just ultimately didn't happen quickly enough. So, be really decisive and back your own decisions, and win and learn from those things. So, if you make a decision and it's a win, then that's great. If you make a decision, it turns out not to be the right decision, then pivot quickly and learn. And I think that's a mentality that I've taken forwards, since those times is be agile, be reactive, back your decisions, but don't die on your sword over previous decisions. Be prepared to be flexible and learn along the way.
It's a really good point. It's fascinating with my clients. I often say to them that the reason you're successful is you've failed or made more mistakes than everybody else. Yeah. But being smart enough to pivot and move on.
Absolutely.
So what do you reckon the business looks like? The future looks like for the business, and what are your main challenges going forward?
Yeah. So look, I think the future is really bright. We're sort of scratching the surface of where we are, where we play. As I mentioned, our products are based on nootropic ingredients, and nootropics is a trend that's sort of getting quite big in the US at the moment. And as with most things in Australia, what happens in the US sort of happens here a couple of years later. I've seen that throughout my career in beverages, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic. So I think there'll be a big trend of nootropics and that awareness around what our brand stands for. And being Australia's first nootropic drink and the largest, I think is going to stand us in really good stead. I think, beyond that is taking our product globally. I think there's very exciting opportunities at the moment in Southeast Asia, Europe and Canada in particular. I think this product resonates really well in those particular markets. So really excited to be exploring some of those options at the moment. In terms of challenges, I think right now, short term, it's like most people, there is a cost of living pressure. And we are a premium product. We're not the cheapest products on the shelf, and nor do we want to be, but that kind of comes with its own challenges with cost of living pressures. But hopefully we're seeing some good signs that the economy is improving, and that's a short-term blip. We're in the nice position that we're in the largest and fastest growing category in beverages in the market. So you can mask a little bit of that challenge with the inherent growth in the category, but it's still there and it's still present. And you do see the flight to value at the moment from a number of consumers.
Yeah, it's the dilemmas that all my clients are dealing with, as you can understand. So to me, next, your biggest learning not as a business owner, but as a business leader, could you share that with me?
Yeah, look, I think especially over this role and previous roles, CEO, you have to wear many hats, but equally you've got to be aware and humble to know your own limitations. I always joke with most of the marketing professionals I work with that I'm not a marketer. I don't know what works. I'm not going to pretend to know what works, but I know where my limitations are. So I think knowing your limitations and surrounding yourself with the best and most passionate people you can that are really on the journey with you. Just being prepared to turn your hand to many things. Kind of jack of all trades is a phrase that gets bandied around a lot, but I really do think in this day and age you need to. I'm an accountant by trade. That was where I spent my first 20 years of my career, and certainly stands me in good stead, having a bit of a level head on my shoulders. But you need to be able to turn your hands to sales and operations and all sorts of areas, and just be prepared to learn and absorb from the best people you can.
Yeah, no, there's some really good lessons in there. There's a great book called A CEO Only Does Three Things. So I've just got it here. By a guy called Trey Taylor. And I'm not totally sure that I agree with it's only three things, but essentially right strategy, which involves, marketing, sales and all that sort of thing, having the right people doing the right things and getting the culture right, and having enough cash.
Yes. Yeah. All that are important. And it will be hard to prioritize them, I think.
Exactly right. So when you think of the word successful, who comes to mind and why?
Yeah, like somebody that I grew up watching and sort of idolizing, I suppose, was Richard Branson. I think he's one of those classic entrepreneurs who people refer to. But for me, it's not about his measure of success. It's about the diversity and the way that he's built an incredibly strong brand, which, I think if you were sat around a board table and someone came to you with the brand Virgin, you'd probably smirk and dismiss it. But to build an incredibly strong brand and then to diversify that across so many different industries. And, when we look at typically diverse businesses, they tend to, originate quite old businesses that are diversified through efficiency. Typically a lot of the larger Japanese businesses like, Mitsubishi and Toyota and Yamaha. But you look at Branson, he's managed to do that, in recent times under a brand that people would have probably been challenged by, and just incredibly diverse. I also love the way that he takes that brand and his passion and his learnings, and then he puts it into areas that he really cares about. So, music and space exploration and travel, and, there's some obvious ones in there, which are probably business decisions like banking, but, he's not afraid to follow his dreams and back his passions, which to me is the sign of a true entrepreneur, because if you love what you do, then you never work a day in your life. So
it's a fair point. I feel that way about my business. Yeah, I was listening to a podcast this morning on my walk, and there's a podcast called How I Built This, which is a fabulous podcast about how entrepreneurs build their businesses.
Yeah.
And the guy being interviewed was the founder of a company called Kinko's, which was it was sold to FedEx for $3 billion. A phenomenal success story. But the reason it was called Kinko's was because his nickname as a child was Kinky, because he had curly hair. And it's extraordinary where the brand names come from. Are you a reader and listen to podcasts? Any recommendations?
Yeah. So I do read. I love to unwind at night with a book, and also a bit of podcast listening as well. I think, probably from a business side, I always have a well-thumbed copy of Playing to Win on the desk. It's probably getting on a little bit in years now, but I think it's still very relevant.
Who's that by?
Lafley and Martin.
Oh, of course, yes.
Yeah. So probably one of your more classic strategy books, but it goes into some of the basics extremely well, and I think it's always good to ground yourself in that and pick it up, once a year and just reread. The other one I quite like as a podcast is the Introvert Entrepreneur.
Okay.
So that's a good podcast series. I think there's a couple of hundred episodes now, and it's really nice. It's around entrepreneurs who aren't extrovert, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's about being successful without sort of self-promotion. And I think in this day and age, there's a lot of the social media heroes and influencers, which is very self-promoting, and the true entrepreneurs that can do that without the self-promotion, and the people that you haven't heard of and aren't necessarily famous, they've often got some really, really sage advice and really interesting stories. So that's a good listen.
Okay, thank you. I'll go and look at that. I've just written a blog on Australian entrepreneurs and the success secrets. So it'd be interesting to have a look and see who missed.
And then probably my other one, I'm a big sailor. I've sailed all my life, and there's a really good book by a gentleman called Eric Twynham called Sail, Race and Win. And it's all around, developing winning mental strategies. And a large chunk of the book is very technical on sailing, but he has some really good advice. And I used to coach a lot of sailing and still do. But a lot of his advice, I find you can translate really well into business as well. So, things like if you spend the race watching the boats behind you and hoping they don't catch you, you'll never end up racing with those boats. Whereas if you spend your race looking at the boats in front of you and trying to catch them, you'll end up sailing with those boats. And I think it's the same in business. Don't look over your shoulder and be afraid that the competition are going to catch you up. Like look forwards and think around, how do I get where I want to be? Not kind of keeping an eye on what's going on behind you.
Great piece of advice.
Yeah.
Where do you sail out of?
I sail at the moment out of Middle Harbour in Sydney, and also at Narrabeen Lakes up on the northern beaches.
Let's say flying ants at Middle Harbour Yacht Club. Many decades ago now. Yes,
I've got a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old daughter who are both very sailing obsessed as well, which is nice that they've picked up on the family hobby.
Yeah.
So I'm spending lots of time driving boats all over the country at the moment, doing events, which is lovely.
My greatest regret is that we live in Darrell and we're not close to the water. Anyway, any last piece of advice for entrepreneurs out there?
I always say back yourself. Take the big decisions and just back yourself. When I moved from the UK to Australia 15 years ago, my wife and I decided we were going to take a bit of a break, and I approached Pricewaterhouse that I was working for at the time and said, can you transfer me to Sydney? And they said, no problem, we do that. We'll send you over there. And I said, and can I have some time off? And they said, what do you want? 3-4 weeks? And I said, a year and a half. And there was this pause, and the managing partner said, well, I'm not going to pay you, but sure. And I asked him later over a beer, I said, why did you say yes? And he said, well, most people wouldn't have the courage to ask. So, back yourself, and if you don't ask, you don't get. And that's kind of stayed with me if you don't ask and you don't back yourself, then you'll never know. And I've got one of my favorite quotes is Mark Twain. He says, 20 years from now, you'll regret more the things you didn't do than those you did.
Yeah.
And I always kind of hold that true and say, is this something I'm going to look back on and regret not doing? Because I believe as humans, we're very good at finding the best of any situation we find ourselves in. So even if you make a bad decision, you find yourself in not a good place, you'll make the best of it because you're there and you have to.
Yeah.
So I always like to, back myself and make the decision that feels right at the time. And I genuinely believe you won't regret it if you do.
Yeah, very good advice. Jonny, thanks so much. Great to speak to you.
Thank you very much. Good to speak to you as well.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Cheers.
If you are hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode, and for that, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We hope you enjoyed this new episode, and if you did, please leave us a review on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, or wherever you watch/listen. Please share this episode with others who may be interested in this topic. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, please send an email to admin@scaleupgrowth.co. Put "Be a guest" in the subject line and tell me a little about yourself. If you want to gauge where your business growth potential is and identify where the biggest opportunities in your business lie, or where the key needs that you need to concentrate on right now are, take our assessment where you will receive personalized advice for improvement. It's quick and free. Go to scaleupgrowth.scoreapp.com. If you would like to work with me one-to-one, I love coaching and get the best outcomes that way. Send me an email to jonathan@scaleupgrowth.co and put one-to-one in the heading. Tell me a bit about your business and let's see how we can apply a great strategy for your business. So that's it for this week. Tune in next time for more great learnings from a scaling entrepreneur.